What if the noise isn't just around you, but within you? This audiobook is your guide back to stillness, truth, and clarity. Beneath the chaos, your real life is waiting. It's time to stop scrolling, start listening, and finally hear yourself again. Introduction. Have you ever had a moment, just a flicker, where everything around you felt too much? The pings, the posts, the people, the pressure? Like the world is shouting and no one, including you, is listening? That's not your imagination. That's modern life on max volume. But here's the unsettling truth. The volume is lying to you. In a world that rewards noise, distraction is currency. You're being sold chaos wrapped in convenience, speed disguised as success, and endless scrolling framed as connection. Every app, every ad, every ding is engineered to pull you away from yourself, piece by piece. But if you've found your way here, it means something inside you, something quiet but powerful, is still alive. It means you're ready to hear again. Not the world, you. Let me tell you how I know. A few years ago, I had what I thought was just an ordinary Thursday morning. Back-to-back meetings, a phone glued to my palm, 47 tabs open, caffeine pumping. You know the drill. But somewhere between replying to a message I didn't care about and pretending to listen to a conversation I didn't remember, something cracked. I opened my laptop and stared at the screen like it had just betrayed me. My mind wasn't just foggy, it was gone. I couldn't think, couldn't breathe, couldn't even remember the last time I felt anything real. I wasn't burned out. I was invisible. I had been swallowed by the noise. That moment was the turning point, not a glamorous breakthrough, not some Instagrammable epiphany, just a simple, terrifying realization. I couldn't hear myself anymore. And if I didn't do something, I'd lose more than my focus. I'd lose me. What followed wasn't a life overhaul or a digital detox retreat in Bali. It was slower, messier, and far more human. I started small, 5 minutes of silence before the day started, questioning the autopilot, unfollowing more than just accounts, expectations, old identities, outdated dreams, listening deeply, sitting with discomfort, making peace with stillness. I didn't get more productive, I got clear. And from that clarity came presence, power, and purpose. I didn't even know I had buried under the noise. That's what this audiobook is about. Not becoming someone new, not checking off another self-help to-do list, but remembering what it means to be here, truly here in your own life. This isn't about escaping the world. It's about finally engaging with it from a place that's grounded, aware, and fiercely present. It's about finding your signal in a world obsessed with static. What you'll learn and unlearn. Across these chapters, we're going to peel back the layers, not just of distraction, but of disconnection. You'll rediscover how to feel what's real again, how to know what's true for you, and how to hold your ground when the world tries to push you in every direction but inward. You'll learn how to reclaim your time, your energy, your attention, not as resources to be optimized, but as sacred parts of who you are. This is not just information, it's transformation. Each chapter will walk you through a deeper layer of clarity, through stillness, truth, solitude, presence, and ultimately, homecoming. Because that's where this ends, not in some perfect version of you, but in a present one. This isn't passive listening. It's an invitation. This audiobook is meant to be used, not consumed. Here's how to make it matter. Reflect. Pause often. Listen to what comes up in you, not just in the audio. Act. Let what resonates shape your next step, even if it's tiny. Stillness. This isn't about adding more. It's about creating space to hear what's already inside you. There will be moments when what you hear here will challenge you. That's on purpose, because growth rarely comes with comfort. But clarity? Clarity changes everything. A warning and a promise. Once you start hearing yourself again, it becomes impossible to go back to the noise. You'll start noticing what drains you, what's fake, what's real, what's yours. The world won't get quieter, but you will. Not numb, not passive, just rooted, focused, awake. And when people ask you what changed, you'll smile, because you'll know it wasn't something you bought or booked or branded. It was a return, a remembering, a reconnection. Welcome to the real work. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Welcome to the age of overstimulation, the rise of the always-on culture. There is a certain kind of fatigue that doesn't announce itself with exhaustion or yawns, but rather with a dull, persistent sense of never quite being fully here. It's a cognitive blur, a fog that drifts in quietly and sets up camp behind your eyes. You feel it when you open too many tabs and forget why you opened them. You sense it when you check your phone reflexively, not out of urgency, but out of habit. You recognize it when you reread the same paragraph 3 times and still don't recall what it said. This is not laziness, and it's not even burnout in the traditional sense. It's overstimulation. It's the result of an always-on culture that demands not just our time, but our focus, our emotions, our energy, and most dangerously, our attention span. In this new era, silence is a foreign concept, and stillness is a form of rebellion. The mind, once accustomed to natural rhythms of stimulation and rest, now rarely gets a moment's peace. Even our moments of supposed downtime are filled with endless scrolling, background noise, and mental multitasking. We don't allow ourselves to be still, because stillness feels like idling in a world that celebrates motion. But that motion is often directionless. Fast, yes, but fragmented. We move quickly from one thing to another, without depth, without pause, without true presence. This is not progress. It's a kind of quiet erosion. Our current way of living is fueled by a constant stream of digital input that never truly turns off. There's no off switch, only more tabs to open, more content to consume, more updates to catch up on. The world is whispering, or more accurately, shouting, into our ears and eyes at all hours, and we've convinced ourselves we have to listen to it all. We wake up and immediately scroll through a dozen feeds. We check our phones while brushing our teeth, while waiting in line, while walking, eating, even while watching something else. Multitasking has become less of a choice and more of a default setting. But the human brain is not wired to absorb this much information without consequence. For centuries, we lived with slow, deliberate patterns, seasonal changes, handwritten letters, face-to-face dialogue. Now we process more data in a single day than people a few generations ago did in a month. And instead of helping us feel more informed or empowered, this flood of content often leaves us feeling anxious, uncertain, and overwhelmed. We mistake stimulation for meaning, activity for impact, information for wisdom. But meaning, impact, and wisdom require something we're rapidly running out of: inner quiet. We rarely ask what this pace is doing to us. We know we're tired. We know we feel scattered. But we rarely pause long enough to consider how much we've adapted to distraction as a lifestyle. The digital world doesn't just exist around us. It infiltrates our habits, shapes our relationships, and even molds our identity. Algorithms tell us what to want. Trends dictate what we care about. Notifications decide when we stop and when we go. And beneath it all, we're slowly losing touch with ourselves. We become more reactive, more easily influenced, and less grounded. The mind, like any system, needs recovery time, but we've eliminated all the natural breaks. We don't just overconsume, we do it compulsively, often without realizing it. We scroll through our feeds like sleepwalkers, chasing connection, but often landing in comparison. We read headlines but not full stories, comment without context, react without reflection. It's not a judgment, it's a survival adaptation. But adaptation doesn't mean it's good for us. In fact, much of what we've normalized is taking us further from clarity. The cost of hyperconnectivity. There is an invisible cost to being this connected, and we pay it in more than just battery life. We pay it in fractured conversations, reduced empathy, lowered creativity, and increased anxiety. When every spare moment becomes a slot to be filled with input, we lose the ability to simply observe, to wonder, to reflect. Silence used to be the birthplace of thought. Now it's something we try to fill as quickly as possible. We turn on music, podcasts, videos, not for learning or enjoyment, but to avoid the discomfort of our own thoughts. And this avoidance has consequences. Clarity comes from contrast. We can only know what truly matters when we step back from the noise, long enough to hear our own inner signal. But for many of us, that signal is faint. It's buried beneath layers of curated feeds, pressured to respond instantly, and 1,000 external voices offering their version of truth. In this environment, it's easy to mistake other people's priorities for our own. We internalize goals that aren't ours, chase recognition we don't need, and ignore instincts that are quietly trying to guide us. Hyperconnectivity gives us access to more people, more ideas, more opportunities. But without boundaries, it also leaves us exposed to more confusion, more comparison, and more disconnection from ourselves. We've lost the rhythm of solitude, not isolation, true, nourishing solitude. The kind where you can be fully present with your own thoughts without judgment, where you can walk without headphones, sit without a screen, exist without input. In our current culture, solitude is often misinterpreted as loneliness or inefficiency. But solitude is the soil in which self-awareness grows. It's where you begin to distinguish the background hum of societal expectation from the quiet truth of your own voice. And here's the uncomfortable reality. Many of us are afraid of what we might hear in that silence. We avoid it, not because we don't have time, but because we don't know how to face the thoughts that arise when there is nothing left to distract us. This avoidance, while understandable, is costing us more than we think. It's robbing us of clarity. It's robbing us of our ability to make conscious choices, to listen deeply, to know what's actually important. In a world where everything is urgent and everyone is talking, choosing stillness becomes an act of rebellion, and perhaps the most important one we can make. Technology and the myth of productivity. One of the most seductive myths of our age is the idea that more tools, more data, and more access automatically lead to greater productivity. But the reality is often the opposite. We're doing more but accomplishing less. We're busier, but not necessarily better. We've equated responsiveness with effectiveness, mistaking speed for depth. It's not uncommon to spend an entire day answering emails, attending meetings, updating dashboards, and replying to messages, and still feel like nothing truly meaningful got done. That's because activity without clarity is just motion. True productivity isn't about doing more. It's about doing the right things with presence, focus, and intention. But in an environment designed to splinter our attention, presence is harder to maintain. And without presence, our work becomes shallow. We skim rather than dive deep. We check boxes instead of building something lasting. We become masters of the urgent and strangers to the important. The promise of technology was liberation, freedom from repetitive tasks, access to knowledge, the ability to connect across time and space. But like any tool, its impact depends on how it's used. Without intentional use, technology doesn't serve us, it uses us. It shapes our time, our energy, even our thoughts. We become trapped in cycles of reaction, chained to our devices not by necessity, but by compulsion. And the tragedy is that we often don't realize how much of our day has been consumed until it's gone. We think we're optimizing our time, but we're often just spreading our attention thinner and thinner across a landscape of distractions. And unlike physical clutter, which you can see pile up in your room, mental clutter is invisible. It accumulates silently, manifesting as irritability, forgetfulness, fatigue, and a persistent feeling of being overwhelmed. Clarity doesn't stand a chance in that environment unless we consciously create space for it. There's no shame in any of this. In fact, shame only deepens the cycle. The truth is, our systems weren't built for this. Our nervous systems were designed for slower rhythms, deeper interactions, and meaningful focus. We are not machines. We're not meant to download the world in a day. And yet, most of us feel guilty when we stop, when we rest, when we say no, as if our worth is directly tied to our output and our humanity an inconvenience to be minimized. But clarity begins when we start questioning these assumptions. When we recognize that presence is not a luxury, it's a necessity. When we understand that the ability to direct our attention is one of the most powerful freedoms we have. And when we commit, not to doing more, but to doing what matters, with a mind that is whole, focused, and free from noise. This chapter is not a judgment on technology, productivity, or even distraction. It's an invitation to look beneath the surface of your daily life, to ask not just how busy you are, but what all that busyness is serving, to consider how often you feel truly clear, truly connected, truly present. And if the answer is rarely, then take heart, not because the problem is small, but because it means you're paying attention. The first step toward clarity is noticing its absence. Once you see the noise for what it is, not a necessity, but a habit, you begin to reclaim the space it has taken. And in that space, you might just hear something remarkable, the sound of your own thoughts, steady and true, waiting patiently beneath the noise. Chapter 2. The Digital Drift, when the scroll becomes the story. It doesn't happen all at once. You don't wake up one morning and suddenly feel disconnected from yourself. It's slower than that, subtle, like a slow leak in your sense of presence. You start reaching for your phone first thing in the morning, telling yourself it's just to check the time. But within minutes, you're down a rabbit hole of emails, trending stories, and social media posts that weren't even on your radar moments before. The day hasn't even begun, but already your attention has been rerouted, hijacked, really, by external noise. Your inner compass hasn't had a chance to calibrate, yet you're already reacting to someone else's urgency, someone else's opinions, someone else's life. What was meant to be a 2-minute glance turns into 20. You finally pull yourself out of the scroll, a little foggy, a little tense, not quite sure what you're feeling or why. This is what I call the digital drift, not just the act of losing time online, but the deeper disconnection from your own rhythm, your own thoughts, your own sense of grounded awareness. The drift is seductive. It doesn't feel like you're losing control. It feels like you're engaging, like you're staying informed, like you're participating. And that's part of what makes it so difficult to confront. The platforms are designed to mimic connection, to stimulate a low-grade sense of belonging, to reward you for staying longer than you meant to. And so, you keep going. You tap, you swipe, you refresh, you scroll. Each action feels so small, so harmless, but over time, they add up. And what they accumulate into isn't just a digital footprint. It's a subtle erosion of presence. It's the replacement of spontaneous thought with algorithm-fed repetition. It's the gradual loss of solitude, imagination, and even boredom, states of mind that are actually vital to our creativity and well-being. We used to have moments of mental stillness built into our days. Those quiet pockets of time while waiting at the doctor's office, standing in line, or riding public transport. They weren't always thrilling, but they were real. They gave us room to drift inward, to reflect, to people watch, to be bored, and let our thoughts stretch into strange, beautiful places. Now, those in-between moments are filled with content. We rarely sit in silence anymore because the idea of doing nothing, even for a minute, has become uncomfortable. But it's precisely in those quiet moments that clarity is born. When every idle second is filled with digital input, we rob ourselves of the mental oxygen we need to think clearly, to reset, to know what we actually believe beneath the influence of what we've consumed. The illusion of connection. One of the most disorienting aspects of the digital drift is that it often masquerades as connection. We like, we comment, we reply to stories, we send memes, we stay in touch. But for all this activity, how often do we actually feel seen? How often do we leave these digital interactions feeling nourished, grounded, or truly heard? More often, we log off feeling a strange cocktail of fatigue and emptiness. We're exhausted, but we don't quite know why. There's a loneliness that can exist even when you're constantly connected to other people. That's the paradox of the digital age. We have never been more reachable, yet so many of us feel unreachable, even to ourselves. Real connection, deep, soul-filling connection, requires presence. It requires time, vulnerability, silence, nuance. It needs space for missteps, for eye contact, for tone of voice, for all the tiny human details that make a conversation real. Online, these subtleties are stripped away, often replaced by emoji, abbreviations, or performative statements. The texture of true interaction gets lost in the velocity. We might feel productive, like we're checking in with dozens of people at once, but the substance of those connections is often thin. That's not to say online connection can't be meaningful. It absolutely can. But when the majority of our relational bandwidth is spent scrolling past people's highlight reels or offering digital gestures in place of genuine presence, we start to confuse visibility with intimacy. Being seen is not the same as being known. And this has deeper emotional consequences than we often acknowledge. We begin to calibrate our self-worth based on feedback loops. Did they like it? Did they respond? Was it viewed, shared, appreciated? These metrics sneak in like background noise and start to govern our internal sense of value. When a post gets traction, we feel affirmed. When it doesn't, we quietly wonder if we misstepped. It's an emotional roller coaster, subtle but persistent, and over time, it teaches us to perform rather than express, to curate rather than communicate. The digital drift pulls us into a space where we're constantly editing ourselves, not just for aesthetic, but for approval. And when that becomes habitual, it's hard to know what's authentic anymore. We lose sight of our own voices because we're too busy adjusting the volume for everyone else. Drifting from self-knowledge. When was the last time you sat with a thought all the way through, without distraction, without input, without Googling something halfway through the process? It's a genuine question, and for many of us, the answer is unsettling. Our thinking has become fragmented, interrupted by design. We rarely let ideas percolate. Instead, we absorb headlines and hot takes and pass them off as comprehension. But deep understanding, the kind that shapes how we live, requires time, space, and discomfort. It requires not just reacting to information, but digesting it, challenging it, seeing how it fits within the mosaic of our lived experience. In the absence of this, we don't just lose knowledge, we lose self-knowledge. We drift so far from our own internal voice that when it does speak up, it feels faint, unfamiliar, or drowned out by the roar of everything else. Self-awareness is not something you stumble into. It's something you nurture through reflection, through solitude, through honest conversation with yourself. It's cultivated in those quiet moments when you allow yourself to ask uncomfortable questions and resist the urge to immediately distract yourself from the answers. But the digital drift makes those moments rare. Instead of sitting with a difficult emotion, we soothe it with content. Instead of pondering a difficult decision, we outsource our thinking to influencers or crowdsourced opinions, and instead of checking in with our internal compass, we open another app. The more we do this, the more foreign our inner world becomes. And the more foreign it becomes, the less we trust it. We start looking outward for clarity, seeking it in productivity tools, motivational videos, opinion columns, endless content. But clarity isn't something you download, it's something you remember. To reverse the digital drift, we have to start reclaiming small pockets of stillness, not as a grand rejection of technology, but as a gentle return to balance. A 5-minute window in the morning before touching your phone, a walk without headphones, a mealtime without screens. These moments are not wasted time. They are vital recalibrations. They allow your mind to settle, your nervous system to reset, and your own voice to rise above the digital noise. They give you the chance to notice what's actually going on beneath the surface of your mental chatter. And it's in these pauses that clarity begins to emerge, not as a single epiphany, but as a quiet, consistent unfolding. This chapter isn't meant to romanticize a life without technology. That's neither realistic nor necessary. The digital world isn't inherently bad. It's a tool. And like any tool, it's all about how you use it. The problem isn't that we engage with our devices. It's that we engage without awareness. We scroll by default. We click without intention. We consume without discernment. The digital drift thrives in unawareness. But the moment you start noticing it, really noticing it, is the moment you begin to take back control. The moment you realize you're not just a passive participant in this new era, but an active shaper of your own digital experience. So, take a breath. Put the device down for a moment. Not forever, just for now. Close your eyes. Listen to the sounds around you. Let your thoughts drift, not toward the screen, but inward. It might feel unfamiliar at first, even a little uncomfortable. But keep going. That's not emptiness you're feeling. It's space. And in that space, something powerful begins to stir. Not content, not noise, not someone else's opinion. Just you, your voice, your truth. Quiet, steady, clear. Chapter 3. The myth of multitasking, the illusion of efficiency. Let's be honest, we've all bought into the idea that multitasking is a superpower. Somewhere along the way, we began to measure our worth, not just by what we accomplish, but by how many things we can juggle at once. It's the badge of the modern world. You see it in job descriptions. Must be able to multitask in a fast-paced environment. You hear it in conversation, people boasting about how many balls they have in the air. And maybe you've felt it too. That little surge of pride when you're texting during a meeting while responding to emails, planning dinner, and mentally preparing for your next call. But what if I told you that multitasking isn't the badge of honor we think it is? What if instead of showing our capability, it's quietly eroding our presence, our clarity, and our peace of mind? Here's the truth, grounded in decades of research, but also, if we're being honest, something we all feel in our bones. The human brain isn't built to multitask. Not really. What we're doing when we think we're multitasking is actually rapid task switching. We're not doing two things at once. We're bouncing back and forth between them at high speed. And with each switch, there's a cognitive cost. A little energy is lost. A little focus is drained. A little clarity slips away. We may not notice the toll immediately, but over time it shows. Our work becomes more scattered. Our attention span shortens. Our memory suffers. And perhaps most painfully, our sense of calm evaporates. Multitasking creates a kind of cognitive smog. You may be working, but you rarely feel fully immersed in anything. You're typing a message, but you're also half listening to a podcast. You're answering emails, but you're also thinking about dinner. You're with your children, but your phone buzzes and suddenly your mind is elsewhere. The body is present, but the mind is splintered. And while that might feel normal, because everyone else is doing it, it's not sustainable. We weren't designed to live in a state of divided attention. Our brains need focus the way our lungs need air. And the more we deny it, the more we suffocate our capacity to live deeply and think clearly. The cost of constant switching. Let's take a closer look at what happens inside our minds when we multitask. Imagine you're working on a report and your phone buzzes with a message. You glance at it, just for a second, but now your attention is fractured. You try to go back to your report, but something shifted. It takes time to reorient. Your brain has to reload the context, like reopening a browser tab and waiting for it to refresh. The interruption may have been brief, but the recovery time can be surprisingly long. Some studies suggest that even short distractions can cost us up to 20 minutes of full concentration. Now, multiply that by the dozens of times we're interrupted each day, by notifications, thoughts, conversations, noise, and it becomes painfully clear. Our productivity isn't increasing, it's drowning in micro-recoveries. But the cost isn't just in time, it's in quality. When we're constantly switching tasks, we don't go deep. We stay on the surface, skimming rather than diving. Our ideas are less creative, our problem-solving less robust, and emotionally, we start to feel depleted. Because switching isn't just a mental process, it's an energetic one. Every shift takes effort. And while one switch might feel like nothing, 100 of them create a kind of invisible exhaustion. That's why you can get to the end of the day and feel like you did so much, yet also feel like you didn't accomplish anything truly meaningful. Your brain has been pulled in so many directions, it's hard to even remember what your core priorities were. There's also something deeper at play here. Multitasking trains us to be uncomfortable with stillness. It conditions us to crave stimulation, to fear boredom, to equate motion with value. And over time, this rewires not just how we work, but how we live. We stop doing one thing at a time, not just at work, but everywhere. We eat while watching TV. We walk while checking messages. We talk while mentally planning our next move. Life becomes a blur of half-attended moments. And in that blur, something precious is lost. Presence. The kind of presence where you can taste your food, hear your own thoughts, feel your emotions, connect with the people in front of you. Multitasking doesn't just dilute productivity, it dilutes life. Reclaiming focus through single tasking. So, what's the alternative? It's not about becoming a monk or abandoning technology. It's about reclaiming your attention, intentionally, one moment at a time. And the simplest, most powerful way to begin is with single tasking. That's right, doing one thing at a time, not because it's trendy, but because it's the natural state in which the mind thrives. Single tasking allows you to immerse yourself in what you're doing, to bring your full presence to it, whether it's writing an email, having a conversation, or washing the dishes. When you do it with focus, something changes. The task feels more meaningful. You feel more grounded. And often, paradoxically, you finish faster and better than if you were trying to do multiple things at once. The practice of single tasking isn't just about work. It's about life. It's about training yourself to be present again. Start small. Choose one activity each day where you commit to being fully there. No distractions, no second screens, just you and the moment. Maybe it's drinking your morning coffee without checking your phone. Maybe it's a phone call with a loved one where you listen deeply without multitasking. Maybe it's a walk without headphones, just observing the world around you. These might seem like small acts, but they are radical in a culture that glorifies doing more. And here's the beautiful thing. The more you practice single tasking, the more your mind starts to recalibrate. You begin to feel less frantic, less fragmented. Your thoughts become clearer. Your memory improves. You sleep better. You begin to notice details you used to miss. People's facial expressions, the taste of your food, the sound of rain on the windows. Life becomes richer, not because you've added anything, but because you've removed the mental clutter that was dulling your perception. One of the most powerful shifts you can make is moving from reactive to intentional attention. Multitasking is reactive. It's driven by impulse, by urgency, by noise. Single tasking is intentional. It's a quiet declaration that your attention is yours, that you don't have to be available to everyone and everything all the time, that it's okay to slow down, to go deep, to focus. In a world that profits from your distraction, choosing presence is an act of defiance and an act of self-respect. This chapter isn't about shame. It's not about making you feel guilty for how you've been working or living. It's about waking up to what's possible when you stop believing the lie that doing more means being more. You are not a machine. Your value is not measured in tabs open, emails sent, or meetings attended. Your value is intrinsic, unquantifiable, and deeply human. And when you stop splintering your attention, when you choose to show up fully even for the smallest moments, you begin to reconnect with that truth. So take a breath. Let go of the need to do 5 things at once. Choose 1. Do it with care, with presence, with your whole heart. That's not just how you reclaim your focus, it's how you reclaim your life. Chapter 4. Rewiring the Brain for Clarity, the Neuroplastic Mind. There's something hopeful, almost poetic about the human brain. It's not static. It's not fixed. For all the moments we feel stuck in old patterns, the truth is that we are not cemented into our habits. Our brain, shaped by what we do repeatedly, also holds the power to change with what we choose to do differently. This is the gift of neuroplasticity. Our mental wiring, the deeply grooved patterns of thought, attention, emotion, and behavior, is not permanent. It is malleable, adaptable, responsive. That means the way we think, the way we pay attention, even the way we emotionally react can shift. But the key word here is intention. The brain doesn't just rewire because we want it to. It rewires when we consistently feed it new patterns. And that's where our opportunity for clarity begins. Most of us are operating on autopilot, repeating the same thought loops, emotional triggers, and response habits day after day. It's not because we're lazy or broken. It's because our brains have been trained by repetition. If, for years, you've responded to stress by reaching for your phone or numbing out with distraction, that becomes your go-to circuit. If your attention has been pulled in 10 directions at once for months or years, your brain learns that pattern of fragmentation. The neurons that fire together wire together, as neuroscientists say. But the moment we become aware, genuinely aware of these patterns, we open the door to change. We start to interrupt the automatic and introduce the intentional. This shift doesn't happen through willpower alone. It happens through gentle, consistent practice. Think of your brain as a landscape where well-trodden trails represent your habits of thought and focus. If you keep walking the same trails, they become easier to travel, but they also become ruts. To create new paths, ones that lead to calm, focus, and clarity, you have to deliberately step off the well-worn routes. It might feel awkward at first. You might second-guess. You'll likely be tempted to fall back into the old way, especially when tired or overwhelmed. But every time you choose the new path, you begin to carve a new groove. Over time, with enough repetition, it becomes your brain's new normal. Reclaiming agency through attention training. One of the most powerful ways to rewire your brain is by reclaiming your attention. Not in some abstract, lofty way, but in small, grounded moments throughout the day. Attention is the currency of your mental life. Where you place it shapes what you perceive, how you feel, and what you believe. When you reclaim your attention from autopilot, when you begin to notice where it's going and gently guide it back, you're not just improving productivity, you're retraining your brain to be awake again. The challenge is that we've outsourced our attention to devices and platforms designed to hijack it. Every ping, buzz, like, and notification is a neurological hook. Dopamine, the brain's reward chemical, surges with each hit, reinforcing the pattern. Over time, our brains begin to crave novelty, stimulation, and constant input, not because it's good for us, but because we've conditioned them to. To reclaim your attention is to break this loop gently with awareness. It's not about quitting technology or disappearing into a cabin in the woods. It's about remembering you have agency. You can decide when and how you engage. You can choose when to pause, when to breathe, when to focus. Start with micro moments. The 2 seconds between reaching for your phone and actually unlocking it, pause there. Ask yourself, what am I really looking for? Information? Comfort? Escape? Is this habit or intention? Most of the time, we're reacting out of boredom or anxiety. But simply pausing, creating that space, activates the part of the brain responsible for conscious decision-making. It breaks the reflex. And every time you do that, even for a breath, you're strengthening your capacity for clarity. You're telling your brain, I am here. I'm choosing this. Over time, those moments accumulate. You begin to feel less pulled and more centered. The fog starts to lift. One of the most accessible and powerful tools for training attention is mindfulness, not in a trendy, overused sense, but in its simplest form. Paying attention on purpose. You don't need incense or a meditation cushion. You just need presence. Try focusing fully on washing the dishes. Feel the water. Notice the texture of the soap. Hear the sound of the sink. When your mind drifts, and it will, gently bring it back. That act of returning is the training. It's not about staying perfectly focused. It's about noticing the drift and choosing presence again and again. Just like going to the gym, it's the repetition that builds the muscle. With time, your brain becomes more capable of staying in the now, of resisting distractions, of settling into calm. Cultivating inner stillness in a noisy world. Beyond attention, the deeper layer of rewiring involves stillness, not just silence, but a kind of internal spaciousness. A room inside your mind where clarity can breathe. The modern world rarely invites us into stillness. It values motion, hustle, noise, opinions, reactions. But stillness, deliberate, chosen stillness, is where insight lives. It's where your thoughts can stretch out instead of being cramped by urgency. It's where your nervous system can reset. And it's where you can begin to differentiate between what's important and what's just loud. Stillness doesn't mean emptiness. It doesn't mean nothing is happening. In fact, some of the most profound shifts occur in those quiet spaces. But to get there, we have to become comfortable with the discomfort that often arises when things slow down. At first, stillness can feel foreign, boring, even threatening. We're so used to being stimulated that silence feels like a void. But that's only because we haven't spent time there. Like any new environment, it takes some acclimation. And when we stay with it, when we sit through the twitchiness, the impatience, the urge to do, something shifts. We begin to notice our thoughts rather than be swept up in them. We start to observe our emotions without being engulfed. And in that space, we begin to meet ourselves again. You don't have to meditate for hours to access stillness. It can be found in small rituals. A slow morning with coffee, a walk without a podcast, a few minutes before bed just watching your breath. These aren't luxury moments. They're essential ones. They're how you make space for your internal compass to surface, the voice beneath the noise. And that voice, that quiet inner knowing, is where clarity lives. Not in the external opinions, not in the algorithms, not in the to-do lists. In you. And when you start to live from that space, even just a little, It changes how you show up in the world. You react less and respond more. You say no with confidence. You listen more deeply. You notice beauty again. Sunlight on your desk, the rhythm of your breath, the way a song moves you. Life doesn't necessarily get easier, but it becomes more yours. You're no longer just surviving the noise. You're choosing what deserves your attention. You're editing your mental space with care. You are not at the mercy of your mind. You are its architect. And while the structure might have been shaped by past habits, culture, or circumstance, you hold the tools to remodel. Every conscious breath, every choice to pause, every moment of single tasking, every pocket of stillness, it all counts. Change doesn't come from grand declarations. It comes from daily, invisible shifts, from deciding again and again to step out of reactivity and into intention. This chapter isn't about being perfect. It's not about becoming some Zen master immune to distraction. It's about starting where you are, with compassion. It's about understanding that your brain is doing its best with the patterns it's been fed, and that it will gladly embrace new ones when you feed it presence, calm, and clarity. You're not broken. You're just wired for a different world. And now you're learning how to wire yourself for the one you want to live in. So let this be your invitation, not to escape the noise, but to rise above it. Not to reject the modern world, but to navigate it with wisdom. Rewiring your brain isn't a one-time fix. It's a lifelong conversation. And every time you show up to that conversation with honesty and care, you are building a life that reflects your deepest truth. A life that isn't just busy, but clear, centered, and deeply alive. Chapter 5. The Anxiety Loop: Understanding the Mechanics of Modern Anxiety. Let's talk about something that often lives quietly beneath the surface of our lives. Anxiety. It's become so common that we sometimes wear it like a second skin, forgetting what it feels like to be without it. For many of us, anxiety doesn't come in the form of full-blown panic attacks or dramatic meltdowns. It's subtler. It's the restlessness in your chest as you wait for a reply, the racing thoughts before bed, the tension you carry in your shoulders from reading too much news or being hyper-aware of everyone's expectations. It's the feeling that you're always behind, even when you're doing everything you can. The loop of what-ifs and worst-case scenarios playing quietly in the background of your day. Anxiety in the modern world isn't just a personal issue, it's systemic. It's baked into the speed, noise, and digital demands of our culture. We are living in an era where information never sleeps, comparison is constant, and the pace of life never seems to slow. The human nervous system, which evolved for a slower, more physically grounded world, is now trying to keep up with alerts, pings, breaking news, inboxes overflowing, and the constant presence of other people's lives, curated and filtered on our screens. Our bodies are carrying more than they were ever meant to. Understanding anxiety doesn't mean we judge ourselves for feeling it. In fact, the very act of noticing it with compassion is where healing begins. Anxiety, at its core, is a survival response. It's your body trying to protect you. It says, something might go wrong. Let's prepare. Let's brace. It's not your enemy. It's your overactive guardian. But when the threat isn't a bear in the woods, but an imagined failure, or a perceived judgment, or a spiraling thought about the future, the body still reacts as if you're in danger. The heart races, the breath shortens, the muscles tighten. And when we don't understand this process, we start to feel like we're losing control. But you're not. You're simply stuck in a loop your body was never taught how to exit. The role of thought in sustaining the loop anxiety feeds on thoughts. Specifically, it feeds on the belief that your thoughts are always true, that what you imagine might happen is inevitable, that the worst-case scenario deserves your full attention. But the truth is, Thoughts are not facts. They're mental events, often helpful, but sometimes distorted. Especially when we're tired, overwhelmed, or emotionally charged, the mind tends to skew negative. It jumps to conclusions, assumes the worst, catastrophizes the future, and filters out the good. This is not a personal flaw. It's a protective mechanism gone into overdrive, and the more we engage with these thoughts without questioning them, the more they spiral. Think of the anxious loop like a track that plays in your head. It starts with a trigger, an email, a comment, a feeling, and before you know it, your mind is sprinting into the future. What if I mess up? What if they think I'm not good enough? What if I lose everything? Your body reacts, your heart pounds, and your breathing shifts. Now your nervous system thinks something terrible is about to happen. And when you feel that rush of fear, your mind looks for a reason. Why am I feeling this way? Oh, right. It must be that thing I'm worried about. And just like that, the loop continues. Thoughts feeding feelings, feelings feeding more thoughts. Breaking this loop isn't about never feeling anxious again. That's not realistic or even necessary. It's about learning to interrupt the cycle with awareness and care. One of the most powerful tools is simply naming what's happening. When you feel the surge, pause and say to yourself, "This is anxiety. My body is trying to protect me. I don't need to believe every thought I'm having right now." This tiny shift, naming and normalizing, creates just enough space between you and the spiral. And in that space, you can begin to respond rather than react. Sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is to breathe, not in a cliché way, but in a biological one. Deep, intentional breathing is one of the few ways we can directly calm the nervous system. When you breathe slowly into your belly, you activate the parasympathetic response, the body's natural calming mechanism. It sends a message that says, "We're safe. We can slow down." Just 5 deep breaths in and out can begin to break the loop. It's not magic, it's biology. And the more you practice, the more your brain learns a new response. We don't have to panic. We can pause, creating a grounded life to reduce anxiety at the source. While managing anxiety in the moment is important, the deeper work is about creating a life that doesn't feed the loop in the first place. That means looking at what you're consuming, how you're living, and what your nervous system is being asked to process daily. Because the truth is, we can't talk about personal peace without addressing environmental inputs. Your brain is always listening. Your body is always responding. And many of us are unintentionally marinating in anxiety-inducing content, scrolling news before bed, comparing ourselves on social media, saying yes to too many things, staying too connected, and never really resting. One of the most powerful things you can do for your mental clarity is to become intentional about your inputs. That means asking yourself, what am I feeding my mind? What voices am I listening to? What stories am I rehearsing every day? Start to edit. Curate your attention like you would your home. Remove what doesn't serve your peace. You don't need to be hyper-informed 24/7. You don't need to keep up with every trend or opinion. You don't need to live your life through the lens of comparison. Your nervous system wasn't designed for this level of input. Let it rest. It also means rethinking how you structure your day. Build in margins. Make space for slowness. Give yourself permission to stop doing everything. You don't have to earn rest by burning out. You don't have to prove your worth through overcommitment. When your life is too full, your mind becomes too loud. Create rhythms that support your clarity. Morning routines that anchor you. Evening rituals that calm you. Boundaries that protect you. It's not about perfection. It's about care. You are allowed to design a life that feels good on the inside, not just one that looks impressive on the outside. And perhaps most importantly, talk to yourself like someone you love, because often anxiety isn't just about external pressures. It's about internal narratives. The way we speak to ourselves matters. If your inner voice is always harsh, always critical, always on edge, your body will stay in a state of threat. But when you speak with kindness, with patience, encouragement, and reassurance, you begin to rewire your emotional response. You start to believe, I can handle this. I don't have to panic. I'm allowed to feel, and I'm allowed to find calm. That shift, repeated often, changes everything. Anxiety doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. It means your body and brain are trying to keep you safe in a world that often feels uncertain, fast, and overwhelming. But you are not powerless in the face of it. You are not stuck. With awareness, with breath, with intention, you can interrupt the loop. You can soothe the spiral. You can become a safe place for yourself. That's the invitation of this chapter, not to live without anxiety entirely, but to live with it in a way that doesn't control you. To become grounded even as the world spins. To find steadiness within. It will take practice. Some days will feel easier than others. You will forget, then remember. You will spiral, then soften. And all of that is okay. What matters is that you keep coming back to yourself with compassion. That you keep choosing calm over chaos, even in small ways. That you remember you're not alone in this. We're all learning how to live in a world that moves faster than our hearts were meant to beat. But together, by slowing down, by becoming aware, by gently rewiring our minds, we can find our way back to clarity. Chapter 6. Redesigning Digital Habits. When convenience becomes control, there's something almost magical about modern technology, this constant portal in our pockets that can connect us, entertain us, teach us, remind us, and even comfort us. And yet, that same tool, when unchecked, often ends up controlling us in quiet, insidious ways. We never really chose this relationship with our devices. We fell into it, slowly, gradually, incrementally. A text here, a notification there, a scroll that turned into 30 minutes, a quick check of the news that left us more anxious than informed. And over time, what began as convenience became compulsion. It's easy to forget just how engineered these platforms are, how they're designed, down to the pixel, to keep us clicking, watching, refreshing. There are teams of behavioral scientists, UX designers, and data analysts whose job is to hold our attention. And they're very good at their job. Every ping, every red dot, every infinite scroll, that's not random. That's architecture. That's dopamine design. And while that's not inherently evil, we need to name it. Because until we recognize that these platforms are designed to exploit our attention, we'll keep blaming ourselves for not having enough willpower to stay focused or balanced. You are not broken for finding it hard to put your phone down. You are not weak for feeling the urge to check your notifications every few minutes. That's not a failure of discipline. It's a reflection of how deeply entangled our lives have become with digital feedback loops. And once we start from compassion, not shame, we can begin to make changes. Not drastic, guilt-fueled detoxes, but thoughtful, sustainable adjustments. Because the goal isn't to reject technology. The goal is to reclaim our relationship with it, to move from being passive users to conscious designers of our digital environment. Designing your digital landscape. Imagine for a moment that your digital life is a physical space, like a home. If someone walked into that space, what would it feel like? Cluttered? Overstimulating? Relaxing? Overwhelming? Would there be quiet corners? Restful views? Or would every wall be filled with flashing headlines, urgent requests, comparison traps, and endless noise? Most of us never intentionally designed our digital environments. They just evolved around us. But the good news is, you can redesign it. You can create boundaries, rhythms, and spaces that reflect who you are and how you want to feel. Start by observing, not judging, just noticing. For a few days, pay attention to when Where and why you reach for your phone. What are the triggers? What's the emotion behind the scroll? Boredom? Anxiety? Loneliness? Habit? Start keeping a simple log, not to shame yourself, but to build awareness. Because once you know what drives your behavior, you can begin to shift it. Then begin the process of decluttering. Not everything needs to go, but some things probably do. Look at the apps that drain you more than they nourish you. The ones that leave you feeling scattered, less than, or tense. Ask yourself, do I really need this? Or is it here out of habit? Rearranging your home screen, deleting apps, or turning off notifications may seem small, but it sends a message to your brain. I'm taking control. You're no longer reacting. You're choosing. Next, build in intentional pauses. Most of our digital behaviors are reflexes. You pick up your phone without even realizing it. That's why adding friction, tiny moments of awareness, can be powerful. For example, move distracting apps off your home screen or into folders. Place a sticky note on your phone that says, "What are you looking for?" Change your lock screen to a calming image or a gentle reminder. Breathe first. These small interventions interrupt the autopilot. They give you a moment to check in, to ask yourself, is this what I want to be doing right now? Also, consider time boundaries. You don't need to be available 24/7. Try setting specific windows for email, social media, or news. Experiment with tech-free zones in your home, like the bedroom or the dinner table. Try phone-free mornings or evenings, even if it's just for 30 minutes. These aren't rigid rules. They're acts of self-respect. They say, my mind matters. My presence matters. I get to decide how much access the world has to me. Reclaiming depth in a distracted world. One of the most insidious effects of our digital habits is what they do to our attention span. Not just in terms of productivity, but in terms of depth. We live in an age of fragments, short posts, quick videos, constant context switching. And slowly, subtly, our capacity for depth begins to erode. We skim more than we read. We react more than we reflect. We consume more than we create. And as that becomes the norm, we start to feel a kind of emotional thinning. Less grounded, less present, less connected to what really matters. But here's the good news. Depth can be rebuilt. Presence can be reclaimed. It starts with practice. It starts with reclaiming the moments that matter. Moments of quiet, of focus, of connection. Try reading one long article, distraction-free. Sit down for a conversation with your phone in another room. Go for a walk without a podcast or playlist. It will feel unfamiliar at first, maybe even boring. But stay with it, because boredom is often the gateway to creativity, to insight, to clarity. When we stop filling every silence with noise, we make space for something richer. Creativity especially suffers under the weight of constant digital consumption. When your brain is always in reactive mode, it doesn't have the space to originate. Original thought requires silence. It requires mental spaciousness. That's why some of your best ideas come in the shower or during a walk, because your mind finally has room to breathe. So if you're feeling stuck, uninspired, or drained, don't push harder. Clear space, reduce input, protect your focus like it's sacred, because it is. And finally, let's talk about connection. One of the promises of technology was that it would make us more connected. In some ways, it has. But in others, it's left us lonelier than ever. We text more but talk less. We scroll through updates but rarely ask real questions. And the irony is that while we're more accessible, we're often less available. Truly being present with someone, without distractions, without divided attention, is one of the rarest and most beautiful gifts we can offer. And it starts with intention. Put the phone down during coffee with a friend. Close the laptop when your partner walks into the room. Listen not just with your ears, but with your whole presence. That's what nourishes us. That's what grounds us. That's what we're craving beneath the noise. This chapter isn't a call to go off-grid. It's a call to wake up, to stop sleepwalking through a relationship with technology that was never meant to be passive. You are allowed to shape your digital life with the same care you'd give to your physical home, your health, your relationships. You're allowed to protect your attention like it's the most precious resource you have, because it is. The apps, platforms, and tools aren't going away, but we can meet them with awareness. We can design our use rather than be used. So ask yourself, what do I want my digital life to feel like? Calm? Clear? Connected? Then start building habits that support that feeling. Start small. Be gentle. Expect relapses. But keep returning to presence. Every time you choose intentionality over impulse, you're rewiring your brain. You're building trust with yourself. You're telling your nervous system, we're safe. We're in control. We don't have to chase everything. This work matters, not just for your focus or productivity, but for your peace, for your ability to hear your own thoughts, for your sense of self in a world that constantly tells you who to be. In a time of infinite connection, clarity comes from choosing what not to connect to, from editing the noise so that what remains is meaningful. You are not behind. You're right on time. And from this moment on, you get to choose how you show up in your digital life and in your real one. Chapter 7. The Cost of Constant Input, the Invisible Weight of Information Overload. It's easy to dismiss the idea of too much information as a non-issue. We live in the information age, after all. Shouldn't more knowledge make us more capable, more empowered? But here's the truth. Our brains were never designed to process this much, this fast, all the time. We weren't built to keep up with every headline, every email, every tweet, every opinion, every product launch, every viral video, every trend, every update from every person we've ever met. And yet, that's what's expected now, that we stay in the loop, that we know what's happening, that we don't fall behind. But at what cost? The cost isn't always loud. It doesn't always show up as a breakdown or burnout. More often, it's quiet. It's the inability to focus on a single task without flicking to something else. It's the low-level anxiety that hums in the background as we scroll. It's the way our thoughts feel scattered, like puzzle pieces from different boxes all jumbled together. It's that strange, itchy feeling of being full, but undernourished, mentally stuffed, but emotionally starved. The tragedy is that most of us accept this as normal. We don't even realize we're drowning because the flood is all we've ever known. There was a time when space and silence were part of daily life. We had natural pauses between activities, during commutes, in waiting rooms, on park benches. Those pauses weren't empty. They were fertile. They gave our minds a chance to catch up, to digest, to daydream. They made room for reflection, insight, connection. But now those spaces have been filled. Every gap is an opportunity for input. Waiting in line? Check your phone. Commercial break? Scroll Instagram. Feeling bored? Open another tab. And while each act seems harmless, the cumulative effect is a life without stillness. A life where our minds never get to rest, let alone reset. The erosion of inner clarity. When was the last time you sat in silence, real silence, for more than a few minutes? No music, no phone, no podcast, no background chatter, just you and your thoughts. If that idea feels uncomfortable, you're not alone. For many of us, silence now feels threatening. Not because it's inherently bad, but because we've lost practice. We've become so accustomed to noise that stillness feels foreign, like stepping into a room you haven't cleaned in years. You're not sure what you'll find there, and so we avoid it. But here's the cost. Without silence, without stillness, we lose access to our own voice. Our intuition gets buried under the avalanche of input. Our values get blurred by the sheer volume of opinions. Our creativity gets choked by the constant consumption of other people's ideas. We mistake reaction for reflection. We confuse information with wisdom. And over time, we forget what we actually think, want, or feel. We become curators of other people's thoughts, not creators of our own. The mind, like the body, needs time to process, to integrate, to connect dots. That's where insight comes from. Not from piling on more data, but from giving your mind space to see patterns. The best ideas don't come when you're drowning in input. They come when you've stepped away, on a walk, in the shower, during a moment of rest. That's not laziness. That's your mind doing its most important work, making sense of things. But if we never stop consuming, we never start understanding. If we never close the tabs, we never hear the through line. This isn't about rejecting the world. It's about reclaiming the ability to make sense of it, about reestablishing your inner compass. Because if you can't hear your own voice beneath the noise, you'll always be pulled by someone else's. And if you're always full of input, you'll never make room for insight. Becoming selective with what you let in. We often think of boundaries as something we set with people, but just as important are the boundaries we set with information. What are you allowing into your mental space each day? What are you feeding your mind? Because just like your body responds to what you eat, your mind responds to what you consume. And in this era, where everything is designed to grab your attention, it's not enough to be passive. You have to become an intentional gatekeeper. Start by looking at your inputs. How many newsletters do you subscribe to? How many podcasts are on your queue? How many social media accounts do you follow that actually make you feel grounded, thoughtful, or inspired? This isn't about creating an echo chamber or burying your head in the sand. It's about choosing quality over quantity, curating a feed that uplifts rather than overwhelms, prioritizing sources that deepen your understanding, not just stimulate your emotions. Then, consider your rhythms. Not all input is bad, but constant input is. The brain needs cycles: stimulation, then rest, focus, then release. If you're always on, your nervous system doesn't get to recalibrate. That's when we start feeling edgy, unfocused, exhausted. So create sacred pockets of input-free time. Maybe it's the first 30 minutes of your day. Maybe it's a tech-free lunch break. Maybe it's a Sunday afternoon with no screens. These aren't luxury practices. They're maintenance. They're what keep your mental and emotional landscape healthy. And perhaps most importantly, question the belief that you have to know everything, that you have to stay updated at all times, that if you miss a headline or don't listen to the latest episode, you're falling behind. That belief is a lie. You don't need to know everything. You need to know what matters. And that's something only you can define. When you start honoring that, when you stop letting urgency dictate your attention, you start reclaiming your peace. You stop chasing and start choosing. You become grounded, not because you have less information, but because you're no longer drowning in it. This chapter has asked you to consider a radical idea: that clarity isn't something you add, it's something you uncover. It doesn't come from packing in more data or opinions or inputs. It comes from subtraction, from silence, from creating enough space in your mind to actually hear what's already there. Beneath the noise of constant input, there is a voice, a wise, grounded, creative voice that is uniquely yours. And it's been trying to reach you. We don't need more hacks or apps or morning routines to find clarity. We need to stop flooding our systems with noise long enough to listen. We need to slow the scroll, close the tabs, and ask ourselves, is this helping me become who I want to be? Or is it just keeping me distracted? That's a hard question, but it's an honest one. And every time you choose stillness over stimulation, presence over reaction, depth over speed, you're answering it. Remember, you are not a machine built to consume. You are a human being built to create, to connect, to make meaning. That requires space. That requires silence. That requires rest. So if you've felt scattered, drained, or unclear, you're not broken. You're just full. Overfull. And it might be time to empty out, not as a punishment, but as a pathway back to yourself. Because beneath the noise, clarity is waiting. Not in the next notification, but in the quiet moment you finally allow yourself to have. Chapter 8. The Myth of Multitasking, the Illusion of Efficiency. For years, multitasking has worn a badge of honor. In resumes, interviews, and daily conversations, the ability to juggle several tasks at once is often painted as a sign of competence. We celebrate it like a superpower. Answering emails during meetings, texting while walking, cooking while on a Zoom call, listening to a podcast while replying to messages. And on the surface, it seems efficient. You're doing more, right? Being productive, maximizing your time. But here's the hard truth, you're not. You're splitting it. And more often than not, you're doing everything just a little bit worse. The science has been clear for a long time, though we tend to ignore it because it doesn't flatter our modern sensibilities. The human brain is not wired for multitasking, at least not in the way we believe. What we often call multitasking is actually task switching. Our attention flips rapidly between tasks, creating the illusion of simultaneous engagement. But each switch comes at a cost. There's a brief cognitive lag every time you refocus, what researchers call a switch cost. Multiply that over a day, a week, a month, and you're bleeding mental energy without realizing it. It's like driving with one foot on the gas and one on the brake. You're expending more effort, but getting less traction. The deeper tragedy is that multitasking doesn't just make us inefficient. It changes the way we relate to the world. It trains us to live on the surface of things, to skim instead of read, to glance instead of listen, to react instead of reflect. Over time, this habit rewires our brains, making it harder to stay with a single thought, a single task, a single moment. Our tolerance for depth shrinks. And in its place grows a restless itch to move on, check again, do something else. We start living in a fractured way, always halfway in, halfway out, never fully anywhere. The cost of divided attention. To understand the cost of multitasking, we need to look beyond productivity and into the realm of presence, because the real price isn't just missed deadlines or scattered focus. It's missed moments. It's the conversation where you nodded but didn't truly hear. The walk where your body was present, but your mind was in your inbox. The creative idea that never surfaced because your attention was too fragmented to catch it. We underestimate how much life slips through the cracks of divided attention. And it's not just external moments we miss. We also lose contact with ourselves. Think about how often your thoughts are interrupted by a buzz, a beep, a tab, a task. When are you actually with yourself fully? When do you finish a thought without being pulled away by another? The truth is, constant distraction doesn't just scatter our focus. It erodes our sense of self. It becomes harder to hear our own thoughts, to know what we feel, to remember what matters. We start living reactively, guided not by intention, but by interruption. There's also an emotional cost. Multitasking creates a constant low-grade tension in the nervous system. When your mind is juggling multiple things at once, it never fully settles. It's like running too many apps in the background. Your system slows down, your battery drains, and eventually things crash. You may not notice it hour to hour, but over time it adds up. You feel more exhausted, less grounded, and more prone to overwhelm. Ironically, this feeling makes us even more likely to multitask, grasping at control, trying to catch up, when what we really need is to slow down. And then there's the relational toll. We may believe we're good at listening while doing, but others feel the difference. We all know what it feels like to be half heard, to sense that someone's eyes are on us, but their mind is elsewhere. It feels dismissive, even if unintentional. And yet, we do this constantly, checking phones at dinner, replying to messages during conversations, glancing at screens mid-sentence. These small ruptures chip away at connection. They send a quiet but potent message. This moment is not enough to have my full attention. And over time, that erodes trust, intimacy, and presence in relationships. Rebuilding the muscle of focus. So what do we do in a world that seems built for multitasking? Where notifications are baked into our tools and urgency feels ever present? We start by telling the truth. That focus is not about perfection, but about practice. That attention is not a fixed trait, but a skill we can strengthen. And like any skill, it starts small. Begin with single tasking. Choose one activity, just one, and do it fully. Not while thinking of the next thing. Not while checking your phone. Just one thing. Drink your coffee without a screen. Write an email with your full presence. Listen to a friend without planning your response. It will feel unfamiliar at first, maybe even inefficient. But give it time. Notice what happens. Notice the texture of experience when you're actually in it, not just moving through it. Then, create environments that support focus. Because willpower alone isn't enough. We need systems. Try batching tasks that require similar types of thinking, grouping your deep work together, and protecting that time. Turn off non-essential notifications. Use apps that block distractions if you need them. Clear your physical and digital workspace. Even lighting a candle or putting on instrumental music can signal to your brain, this is focus time. These aren't rituals of restriction. They're rituals of respect for your own attention, your own depth. Also, build in breaks, real ones, because the brain needs rhythm. Even the most focused mind can't sustain deep work endlessly. So take intentional pauses. Step away from your screen. Breathe. Stretch. Go outside. These moments aren't interruptions. They're integration. They give your mind a chance to catch up, to connect ideas, to refresh. And when you return sharper, clearer, more creative. That's not laziness. That's wisdom. And perhaps most importantly, be kind to yourself. You will get distracted. You will be tempted to multitask. That's not failure. That's human. The goal isn't to eliminate distraction forever. It's to notice it sooner, to return to presence faster, to build the muscle of attention not through force, but through repetition. Every time you choose one thing over many, you're strengthening that muscle. And over time, that muscle changes your life. There is something quietly revolutionary about doing just one thing. In a world that screams for more, faster now, choosing to be fully present with a single task, a single thought, a single moment, is an act of resistance. It's a way of saying, my attention is not for sale. My life is not a race. I choose to be here. When you slow down and focus, you don't just become more productive. You become more alive. You start noticing things again. The way your tea smells, the way a sentence unfolds, the way a loved one's face lights up when you really listen. These aren't small details. They're the fabric of your life, and you can't experience them while juggling a dozen things at once. So maybe it's time to rewrite the narrative. Multitasking isn't a superpower. Presence is. Focus is. The ability to give your full attention to what's in front of you. That's the rare gift. That's the edge. And that's where the magic lives. In the depth, in the quiet, in the sacred act of doing one thing with your whole heart. You don't have to change everything at once. Just start where you are. One task, one breath, one moment. And in that moment, let yourself arrive. Let yourself be fully here. That's how clarity returns. That's how life begins to feel whole again, not by doing more, but by being more with what you do. And slowly, steadily, you'll begin to remember you were never meant to live split. You were meant to live present. Chapter 9. The Role of Boredom and Stillness. Redefining boredom in a hyper-stimulated world. Somewhere along the way, boredom became the enemy. It's something we learned to avoid, to suppress, to escape as quickly as possible. From early childhood, we're conditioned to equate being bored with being lazy or unproductive. And in today's world, we don't even need to tolerate boredom anymore. Not for a second. If there's a pause in the conversation, we grab our phones. If a meeting lags for a moment, we open a new tab. If we're waiting in line or riding in a car, out comes the entertainment. We've built a culture around avoiding boredom like it's a virus. But what if we've gotten it completely wrong? What if boredom isn't something to fear, but something to welcome? At its core, boredom is simply the absence of stimulation. It's the moment when your brain says, "I'm not being entertained. I'm not being distracted." And that moment is powerful. It's where possibility begins. Because boredom is not a void, it's a threshold. It's the space just before something emerges. The mind, when left unstimulated, starts to wander. And that wandering is not aimless, it's generative. That's where daydreams are born. That's where ideas are stitched together from fragments. That's where we begin to notice things we otherwise overlook. The sound of birds, the shape of our thoughts, the tension in our bodies. But we rarely make it there. Most of us are so uncomfortable with even a few seconds of boredom that we rush to fill it. We swap discomfort for dopamine. We trade a chance to go inward for the certainty of something external. It makes sense. Stillness feels strange when we're so used to movement. But if we keep escaping boredom, we also keep escaping the insights it holds. We never give ourselves a chance to see what arises when the noise stops. We never ask what boredom is trying to reveal. Stillness as an act of listening. Stillness is more than the absence of movement. It's an invitation to listen, to tune in, not out. When you sit in stillness, the world doesn't stop, but your relationship to it changes. You begin to sense the rhythms underneath the rush. You notice the soft beat of your own breath. You start to see your thoughts, not as commands, but as clouds drifting by. And slowly, the static begins to clear. A deeper kind of attention emerges, one not driven by urgency, but by presence. This is where stillness becomes sacred. It's not just about rest, it's about reconnection. In stillness, the masks we wear start to loosen. The roles we play fade. What's left is something more honest, more whole. You might meet emotions you've been avoiding, grief, loneliness, anger, confusion. Or you might encounter beauty that's been waiting for your attention. A childhood memory, a creative spark, a quiet gratitude for nothing in particular. This isn't easy. Stillness can be confronting, but it's also clarifying. It's the place where we come home to ourselves. You don't need a meditation cushion or a silent retreat to find this. You only need to pause, to give yourself a moment between doing and reacting. That moment might happen in your car before walking into work, or in the shower, or while waiting for water to boil. The form doesn't matter. What matters is the permission you give yourself to not fill the space, to trust that stillness isn't wasted time, it's essential time. We often say we want clarity, insight, direction, but we seek it in noise, in podcasts and posts and piles of content. And while information can help, it cannot replace the wisdom that arises from within. That kind of knowing only comes when you make space. Stillness is the doorway. And boredom? Boredom is the knock. Boredom as a spark for creativity and emotional healing. One of the most overlooked gifts of boredom is its role in creativity. It's no coincidence that many of our best ideas come when we're not trying, when we're walking, showering, staring out a window. That's not random. That's what happens when the brain slips into what neuroscientists call the default mode network, a state activated during rest and boredom. It's when the mind isn't focused on external tasks, but instead starts to explore internally. It retrieves memories, imagines futures, and connects ideas in ways we can't force through effort alone. This is the birthplace of creativity, not in the hustle, but in the hush. When we allow ourselves to be bored, we create space for imagination, for synthesis, for spontaneous insights, and in a world obsessed with productivity, that might seem inefficient. But in truth, it's the most productive thing we can do. Some of history's greatest thinkers, Einstein, Newton, Virginia Woolf, understood this. They knew that idleness wasn't laziness. It was a portal to genius. But creativity isn't the only thing that arises in stillness. So does healing. Our nervous systems are constantly scanning for danger, reacting to stimuli, managing stress. In this reactive state, deep emotional processing is impossible. Stillness shifts us into a different mode, a parasympathetic state where healing can happen. It's here that emotions rise to the surface, not to overwhelm us, but to be seen, felt, and released. Boredom often precedes this. It's the quiet before the emotional storm, the space where something buried asks to be acknowledged. This is not always comfortable, but it is necessary. Emotions don't disappear because we ignore them. They wait, and stillness is where they find us. This doesn't mean you have to confront everything all at once, but when you stop filling every gap with distraction, you begin to hear what your heart has been whispering. Sometimes it's a truth you've been avoiding. Sometimes it's a need you've been denying. Sometimes it's simply a sigh, your body exhaling because, for once, it's allowed to just be. It's easy to keep moving. The world rewards motion. But if you're reading this, if you've made it this far, it means something in you is craving something deeper. Not more content, but more contact. Not more stimulation, but more soul. That's what boredom and stillness offer, not as punishments, but as paths. You don't need to overhaul your life to embrace them. You can start with 1 minute, one pause, one breath. Let yourself be bored in line at the store. Let yourself stare at the ceiling before bed. Let yourself drive in silence instead of defaulting to noise. These small acts accumulate. They build a new rhythm, a new relationship with time, a new respect for your inner world. And in that space, something shifts. Life starts to feel less like a blur and more like a tapestry, woven with presence, threaded with awareness. You begin to realize that you are not here to consume every moment. You are here to live it, to feel it, to be changed by it. That kind of living doesn't happen when we're always entertained. It happens when we're willing to be still long enough to notice. So the next time boredom knocks, don't rush to shut the door. Invite it in. Sit with it. Ask what it's trying to show you. And when the stillness comes, let it wash over you. Let it empty out the noise. Let it make space for what really matters. Because beneath the discomfort, beyond the urge to scroll or check or move, there's a clarity that's been waiting for you. A clarity that says, you don't have to chase meaning. You only have to be still enough to receive it. Chapter 10. The Value of Monotony. The Quiet Wisdom of Routine. We live in a culture obsessed with the new. New goals, new apps, new trends, new habits, new ways to optimize every waking moment. In this pursuit of novelty, monotony often gets a bad reputation. It's painted as lifeless, boring, even soul-crushing, something to escape or reinvent. But let's take a closer look, because beneath the surface of what we call monotony lies something deeply stabilizing, quietly profound. There's a reason monks, artists, athletes and sages alike turn to repetition and ritual. They understand that monotony isn't the enemy of meaning. It's often its birthplace. There is a kind of sacred rhythm to doing the same thing every day. Whether it's brewing your morning coffee, walking the same path to work, washing dishes at night, or journaling before bed, these small acts carry weight. They become like quiet prayers, anchoring us in the midst of chaos. While the world spins unpredictably around us, our routines become places where we don't have to perform or impress. We just are. And in that being, we touch something timeless, something steady. The gift of monotony is that it doesn't demand anything from us except presence. But we often miss that gift because we confuse repetition with stagnation. The truth is, they're not the same. Stagnation is lifeless. Repetition is living. The sun rises and sets in the same arc each day. The tide comes and goes in predictable rhythm. Trees drop their leaves every fall and bloom again in spring. Nature itself runs on repetition. And so do we. It's not just comforting, it's necessary. In repeating something, day after day, we begin to find nuance. We begin to notice. What once felt dull becomes dimensional. That morning coffee isn't just caffeine. It's a moment of solitude. That walk isn't just transportation. It's an encounter with light and sound, motion and mood. Monotony, when approached with care, becomes a canvas for mindfulness. The deep creativity hidden in repetition. If you ask any master craftsperson, whether a sculptor, musician, potter, or dancer, they'll tell you, repetition is the path to mastery. It's in doing something over and over again that we come to understand it more intimately. The fingers learn what the mind cannot explain. The eyes begin to see what the heart has long felt. Monotony becomes a gateway to something transcendent. The same piano scale played for the 1,000th time unlocks a new emotion. The same brush stroke, repeated again and again, creates texture, depth, feeling. And it's not just for artists. Creativity in any form thrives not in constant novelty, but in deep attention, in the willingness to return to the same thing again and again until its shape changes in your hands. Our culture tells us that creativity is spontaneous and dramatic, a lightning bolt of inspiration. But often it's quiet. It looks like showing up even when you don't feel inspired. It looks like doing the same task with just a little more care. It's sweeping the same floor, teaching the same lesson, cooking the same meal, but noticing something new each time. There's a humility in monotony, a discipline in showing up when no one is watching. And in that discipline, something powerful awakens. You begin to discover not just the task, but yourself, your thoughts, your habits, your feelings. Monotony reveals the patterns you live by, some helpful, some not. It's like holding up a mirror. And in seeing yourself clearly, you're given a chance to choose, to refine, to evolve. This is where real growth happens, not in dramatic shifts, but in small, consistent steps. Change is rarely a leap. It's a rhythm, a slow turning of the wheel. When you embrace monotony instead of resisting it, you start to find comfort in the ordinary. You learn to trust the process, not just the result. And that trust becomes the soil in which creativity and confidence grow. The emotional grounding of predictability. There's something deeply regulating about knowing what to expect. Predictability can be a balm for the nervous system. In a world that feels increasingly volatile, where headlines scream, algorithms shift, and workdays blur, having certain constants in your life becomes essential. It could be a bedtime ritual, a weekly phone call with a friend, a walk at lunch, or simply eating dinner at the same table every night. These aren't just habits, they're anchors. They tell your mind and body, you are safe here. You can rest. Many of us are walking around overstimulated, undernourished, and emotionally frayed. We think we need another breakthrough, another hack, another escape. But often, what we really need is a return to simplicity, a return to rhythm, a return to the things that don't shout for our attention, but quietly support our well-being. Monotony isn't flashy, but it's faithful. It's the friend that shows up every day, no matter how you feel. And here's the paradox. The more we embrace the predictable, the more space we create for the unpredictable to land gently. When your life has a rhythm, the unexpected doesn't feel like an ambush. It feels like a variation in a song you already know. You have a baseline, a home base, a sense of who you are even when things get messy. This emotional steadiness is what allows us to stay grounded when everything else shifts. And it doesn't come from grand gestures. It comes from showing up, over and over, from letting the same sun rise in your routine and seeing it anew each day, from realizing that monotony isn't a cage, it's a frame, a container that gives shape to the art of your life. Closing reflection. The freedom in the familiar. It's easy to dismiss the familiar, to think that anything done too often loses its meaning. But often, the opposite is true. The more we return to something, the more we learn to see it. The more we practice, the more graceful we become. The more we lean into monotony, the more we uncover its quiet layers of meaning. Think of the people you love most. You don't need grand experiences with them every day. What makes love feel real is the repetition, the daily presence, the shared routines, the way they greet you the same way every morning, the way they remember your coffee order, the way they hold your hand without thinking. Love, like life, is built in monotony. And when we honor that, we stop chasing fireworks and start appreciating the slow burn. So if you're feeling stuck in the sameness of your days, consider this. What if this sameness is not something to escape, but something to explore? What if the repetitive parts of your life are not dull, but sacred? What if the key to feeling more alive is not adding more, but noticing more? Because here's the truth. The present moment is always new, even when the structure around it isn't. You are never the same person twice. And so, even the most ordinary routine holds the potential to become extraordinary if you meet it with presence. The way you wash the dishes, the way you write an email, the way you say goodbye, these are not just tasks. They are offerings. They are moments where your life becomes visible to you, not in flashes of novelty, but in the quiet grace of repetition. And perhaps that's the secret beneath the noise. Not more excitement, not more change, but a deeper relationship with what's already here. Monotony, approached with love, becomes meditation. It becomes mirror. It becomes medicine. So breathe into it. Let it hold you. Let it teach you. And let it slowly guide you back, not to a different life, but to the life you already have, seen through clearer eyes. Chapter 11. How to handle digital overload. It usually starts small. Maybe you're checking the time, or replying to one message. Maybe you're opening your favorite app just for a second, just to unwind. Then suddenly, without quite realizing how you got there, you've slipped down a digital rabbit hole. 10 minutes, 20, maybe an hour. A fog settles in. You look up and wonder, what was I doing before this? That quiet unraveling of time, of attention, of energy. It's become so familiar, so frequent, we rarely even question it. And when we do, it's often laced with guilt, like we've somehow failed to manage our lives correctly. But the truth is, it's not entirely our fault. Our devices, our apps, our digital ecosystems, they've been engineered to keep us scrolling, swiping, checking, clicking. Not because we're weak-willed, but because they're designed that way. And in this environment, managing our attention is no longer just a matter of discipline. It's an act of reclaiming ourselves. What we're dealing with is not simply distraction. It's a kind of fragmentation. Our attention, once whole and steady, now feels scattered, constantly pulled in 100 directions. Notifications buzz like doorbells to different mental rooms. Open tabs multiply like branches on a tree. Even when we try to focus, we carry a background hum of tension, as if something might need us at any moment. This isn't just inconvenient, it's exhausting. Our nervous systems were not designed for this kind of input. Our brains crave periods of stillness, of depth, of being able to follow a single thread from beginning to end. But in a world of constant digital stimulation, stillness feels foreign, sometimes even uncomfortable. We've been conditioned to expect interruption, so much so that silence can feel suspicious. But what if that silence is exactly where our clarity lives? Part of what makes digital overload so disorienting is that it happens beneath our awareness. We rarely choose to be overwhelmed. It creeps in gradually, one app at a time, one open window, one dopamine hit. And because so much of it is habitual, the first step to handling digital overload isn't about throwing our phones in a drawer or deleting every account. It's about noticing, really noticing. Noticing how often we reach for our devices without thinking. Noticing what we feel before we do. Are we bored, lonely, anxious, looking for connection, or just avoiding something hard? These moments are data, not judgments. They tell us something real about what we need. And when we get curious instead of critical, we open a door to something deeper than digital detox. We open a door to healing. There's a subtle but powerful shift that happens when we stop asking, "How do I use my phone less?" and instead ask, "What am I seeking when I reach for it?" That shift takes us from surface-level strategies to core-level truths. Because often, our digital habits are not just about convenience or addiction. They're about unmet needs. We want to feel connected. We want to feel seen. We want to feel entertained, informed, inspired, or simply less alone. And while technology can offer glimpses of those things, it often leaves us wanting more. Like eating fast food when you're starving. It fills the space, but it rarely satisfies. The more we look to screens to soothe us, the more disconnected we can become. From ourselves, from others, from the present moment. So how do we begin to gently, honestly shift this pattern? Not with shame, not with rigid rules, but with kindness and clarity. Start small. Choose one area of your digital life to become more conscious about. Maybe it's morning phone use. Maybe it's scrolling at night. Maybe it's how often you check email. Don't try to fix everything at once. Instead, pay close attention to that one area. Notice the impulse. What triggers it? What happens in your body? Your breath? Your mood? Just observe. And then, this is key, practice pausing. Just for a few seconds. Between the impulse and the action, place a breath. That pause isn't empty. It's powerful. It's where freedom lives. As you build awareness, you'll begin to see your habits more clearly, not as flaws, but as loops. Loops you can interrupt. Loops you can rewrite. One of the simplest ways to support this shift is to change your environment. Our phones are not neutral objects. They're designed to be as appealing as possible, so make them less so. Remove apps from your home screen. Turn off non-essential notifications. Use grayscale mode if you need to. Put physical distance between you and your phone at key moments, during meals, before bed, while working, while walking. These tweaks might seem small, but they create space, and space is what attention needs to breathe. Another powerful practice is digital closing rituals. Just like we wind down before sleep, we can create moments to consciously end our digital sessions. Before you log off, take 30 seconds to close tabs, silence alerts, maybe even name aloud what you're letting go of. It sounds simple, even silly, but rituals work. They help the mind transition. They signal that you're stepping back into presence. Over time, These rituals become anchors, reminding you that you are not a machine and your worth is not measured by your output. Of course, none of this means rejecting technology entirely. The goal isn't to demonize devices. They're tools, and often they're beautiful ones. They let us connect with loved ones, learn new skills, access art and ideas from across the world. But like any tool, they require boundaries. And more importantly, they require intention. Why are you picking up your phone? What are you hoping it will give you? How do you feel after? These questions turn unconscious habits into conscious choices. And choice is where power lives. Let's talk for a moment about boredom. Most of us fear it. We rush to fill it. But boredom isn't the enemy. It's a portal. It's the brain's way of saying, I'm ready for something different. Not just different stimuli, but different thought, different reflection, different depth. When we resist boredom, we resist the very states that creativity and insight depend on. Think about the last time you had a great idea. Was it during a scroll session? Or was it while you were walking, showering, staring out the window? Our best thoughts need stillness. They need space. And boredom is often the bridge that gets us there. Another important part of handling digital overload is reconnecting with analog joy. Holding a book, writing by hand, listening to music with your eyes closed, sitting on a bench with no agenda. These moments are not luxuries. They are necessities. They remind us what it feels like to be human, not as consumers, but as beings. Not every moment needs to be optimized or recorded or shared. Some moments are just for you. And the more of those you create, the more resilient you become to the pull of the digital tide. It's also worth saying that part of why we stay so tethered to our screens is because we're afraid of missing out. FOMO is real, but so is what we miss when we're always connected. We miss the softness in someone's eyes, the silence between words, the way the light falls through the trees at 4 p.m. We miss the rhythms of our own inner world, the thoughts and feelings that only surface when we're not busy. What if we redefined FOMO? What if, instead of fearing missing out on what's online, we feared missing out on what's right here? Here's something you might need to hear. You're not behind. You're not broken. If you feel digitally overwhelmed, it's not a sign of failure. It's a sign of sensitivity. And sensitivity is a strength. It means you're awake enough to notice that something isn't working, that your soul is craving more than likes and updates, that you're ready for presence, for depth, for connection that doesn't need a password. And this is the moment to begin, not with drastic rules, but with quiet courage. Start by creating just one protected pocket of time each day. A tech-free hour, a sacred pause, a walk with no podcast, a conversation with no phone on the table. Let that time be enough. Let it build. And let yourself feel what arises when the noise dies down. At first, it might be discomfort, restlessness, but underneath that is something wiser, quieter, your own voice, the one you forgot you missed. Digital overload isn't a problem to fix. It's a relationship to renegotiate, one that asks for honesty, boundaries, and trust. And like all relationships, it's not about perfection. It's about presence. You won't always get it right. You'll still get lost in scroll holes. That's okay. What matters is returning, again and again, to yourself, to this moment, to what matters most. Because beneath the buzz, beneath the updates, beneath the endless scroll, there is a quieter world. A world where your thoughts are your own, where your attention isn't mined for profit, where you can feel again, really feel. And that world is still here, waiting. Every time you put the phone down, every time you look up, and when you do, You don't just find stillness, you find yourself. Chapter 12. Listening to what's unsaid. It's often in the spaces between words where the truth begins to whisper. The moment just after someone stops speaking, the breath that lingers, the shift in their posture, the quiet ache in their eyes. That pause contains more than any sentence could, but we rarely wait long enough to hear it. We fill those silences too quickly, anxious to respond, explain, fix, or move forward. Somewhere along the way, we were taught that silence is awkward, that if it stretches too long, something must be wrong. But silence isn't a void. It's a vessel. It holds everything that language can't. And in a world where everyone is talking, learning to listen, truly listen, to what isn't being said, may be one of the most radical healing acts we can choose. There is a kind of listening that requires more than ears. It asks for presence, for attunement, for a willingness to sit with what is unresolved. This kind of listening can't be done halfway. You can't scroll and listen. You can't plan your reply and listen. You can't fix and listen. You have to be there, not just physically, but emotionally, energetically. You have to lean in, not with your body, but with your attention. That kind of listening is rare, but it's unforgettable. Think back to a moment when you felt truly heard, not just understood intellectually, but received. Someone looked at you without judgment. They didn't rush to offer solutions or change the subject. They made space. And in that space, you softened. Because presence is disarming. It tells us, you don't have to defend yourself here. We are surrounded by noise, yet we are starving to be heard. That paradox lies at the center of modern disconnection. Everyone is broadcasting, yet few feel truly seen. Social media, messaging apps, constant availability, all of it gives the illusion of closeness, but much of it is performative, curated, controlled. Real intimacy, the kind that opens us, that nourishes, requires something slower, more vulnerable. It means making peace with the silence, with the pauses, with the discomfort of not always knowing what to say. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing we can offer isn't advice, it's presence, the language of silence. Silence has its own language. It speaks in glances, in energy, in the way someone exhales when they finally feel safe. But learning to interpret that language takes time and courage. We're conditioned to rely on words as our primary currency of connection. We use them to persuade, explain, defend, and declare. But words can only reach so far. So much of human emotion is wordless. Grief, longing, shame, love, the deepest layers of our experience resist tidy expression. They live in tone, in pacing, in silence. The mother who doesn't speak after hearing hard news. Her silence is not empty. It's thick with feeling. The friend who hesitates before answering a question. That pause tells you everything. But we have to be quiet enough to notice, and brave enough not to fill the gap too quickly. There's a difference between silence that connects and silence that alienates. The former is intentional. It's a shared space, held with care. The latter is avoidance. It pushes others away. The key is presence. When we are fully present, even silence can feel warm, supportive. But when we are distracted or emotionally absent, silence becomes cold, distancing. The same pause can either say, "I'm here with you," or "I don't know what to do with this." Learning to discern that difference takes emotional maturity, and it takes a willingness to sit with discomfort, not to escape it, but to understand it. Silence also gives us access to our intuition. When we stop filling every moment with words or content, something deeper has a chance to surface. That inner knowing, that felt sense. We don't need to solve everything in real time. Sometimes, simply sitting with what's unsaid allows clarity to emerge on its own. In conversations, this means resisting the urge to interrupt, to offer a solution, to wrap it all up. Just let it breathe. Let the moment unfold at its own pace. Often, people don't need us to speak. They need us to hold the space, to hold the emotion, to hold the unspoken parts of themselves they haven't found words for yet. Listening without an agenda. We often think we're listening when what we're really doing is preparing to respond. We're rehearsing our next sentence, forming our opinion, making a mental list of ways to help. It's not that we're trying to be selfish. Often, we care deeply. But real listening requires us to surrender that impulse, to fix, to advise, to contribute. Instead, it asks us to be curious, to listen without an agenda, without assuming we know where the other person is going, without jumping in to rescue them from their own story. It's an act of humility. It says, I don't know everything, and I don't need to. I'm here to learn. This is especially important in emotionally charged moments. When someone is grieving or angry or afraid, they don't need a solution. They need validation. They need to know their experience is real. That it matters. We're so quick to say, look on the bright side, or it could be worse, or here's what I did when that happened to me. We mean well, but those responses often make people feel invisible, like we skipped past their pain to make ourselves more comfortable. Instead, we can try saying nothing, or saying, that sounds really hard, or even just, I'm here. Those words, simple as they are, hold power because they leave space. They let the other person fill it with whatever they need. Listening without an agenda also means listening to ourselves. Often, when we react quickly in conversation, when we feel the need to defend or correct or clarify, it's because something inside us feels threatened. Our ego wants to protect itself. Our identity feels at risk. But if we pause, if we listen to that inner reaction without obeying it, we can learn a lot. We can learn what wounds are still tender, what beliefs we're still gripping, and from that awareness, we can choose a different response, one that's rooted in understanding, not reactivity, one that builds trust, not walls. Creating space for the unspoken. Some of the most important conversations we'll ever have are the ones that don't begin with words. They begin with presence, with time, with a willingness to simply be together. If you've ever sat with someone in deep grief, you know how little language matters. No sentence can erase their pain, but your being there, fully there, can make that pain more bearable. The same is true in relationships of all kinds. When we create space for the unspoken, we create room for honesty, for vulnerability, for the kind of connection that doesn't rely on performance. To do this well, we need to slow down. Our lives move so fast that we rarely allow enough space for the deeper layers of communication to emerge. A 5-minute check-in between meetings won't uncover someone's truth. A rushed phone call won't reveal what's really going on beneath the surface. Depth takes time. It takes patience. And it takes the courage to be uncomfortable, to sit in the mess, to hear things we might not like. But that's where intimacy grows, in the murky, honest middle. Not in the polished story, but in the raw experience underneath it. We also need to be intentional about the spaces we create. A softly lit room, a walk with no distractions, a dinner with phones put away. These small details send a message. This moment matters. They invite openness. They signal safety. And when people feel safe, they open. They let down their guard. They say the thing they've been holding in. And that's when real connection happens. Not through perfectly crafted responses, but through mutual presence, through quiet bravery, through listening to what's unsaid and saying without words, you don't have to hide here. In a distracted world, listening has become a sacred skill. It's not just about hearing words, It's about honoring the person behind them. It's about slowing down long enough to witness someone as they are, not as we wish them to be. And that kind of listening changes everything. It softens defensiveness. It dissolves conflict. It deepens love. Not because we've said the right thing, but because we've been willing to say less, to be present, to make space for what's real even when it's messy or hard or silent. Chapter 13. The Courage to Be Alone. In a world addicted to noise, distraction, and constant validation, solitude has been cast as something to fear, an absence rather than a presence, a signal that something is missing rather than something deeply available. We are taught from a young age that aloneness is synonymous with loneliness, that silence must be filled, that the measure of a life is how many people surround you. And so we grow up terrified of the quiet, rushing to fill every space with someone, something, anything. But what if we've misunderstood solitude entirely? What if solitude isn't the void we imagine, but the mirror we need? What if being alone isn't about isolation, but intimacy, the kind that begins with oneself? To be alone is to come home to the self, unfiltered, unmasked, and often unfamiliar. It requires courage, not the kind you shout about, but the quiet kind, the kind that meets you in the stillness and says, "This is where you start listening. This is where you meet you." So much of our modern discontent arises not from what's happening externally, but from the sheer unfamiliarity of being with ourselves. We chase productivity, social interaction, digital connection, all of it often cloaked in the noble guise of engagement or growth. But beneath the surface lies a quieter truth. We're running. Not from others, but from the deep and often unexamined terrain of our inner world. And yet, ironically, that's the very place where our deepest answers live. You cannot know what you truly value if you never sit long enough with your own silence. You cannot discern your voice in a crowd if it's always drowned out by others. Solitude creates the space for self-trust to bloom. But first, it strips away the distractions. It confronts you. And that confrontation, though gentle at first, asks questions that no one else can answer for you. Who are you when no one is watching? What remains when the applause fades? What do you long for when the world goes quiet? It is not always easy, this path of solitude. In fact, many avoid it not because they don't crave it, but because they fear what it might reveal. And that fear is valid. Solitude does not flatter the ego, it exposes it. It removes the protective layers we've built through identity, social roles, and routines. Left alone with ourselves, the narratives we've told for years may begin to fray. The illusions of who we're supposed to be start to give way to a more raw, unedited self. At first, this might feel like unraveling. And in many ways, it is. But it is the kind of unraveling that clears space for authenticity, the kind that sheds inherited scripts so that something true can take root. In that shedding, there is grief. Grief for the personas we no longer need, the versions of us we built for survival, but now outgrow. But there is also tremendous liberation, because once we stop performing, we can finally begin to live. The myth of constant connection. Our culture idealizes connection, often in ways that leave little room for solitude. We are constantly encouraged to share, respond, engage, be seen. And while connection is beautiful and vital, it becomes dangerous when it turns compulsive, when we start to believe that our worth is tied to our visibility, our busyness, our availability. We begin to feel guilty for disconnecting, even momentarily. A weekend offline feels irresponsible. A dinner alone becomes suspect. But what if solitude isn't the opposite of connection? What if it is the foundation of it? Without solitude, connection becomes reactive rather than intentional. We show up from habit, not from clarity. We say yes because we're afraid of being forgotten, not because something feels true. We perform rather than engage. Solitude then becomes an act of restoration, a recalibration. It allows us to return to others from a place of fullness rather than depletion. Like a tree rooted deep in the earth, we become stable not because of how many branches we have, but because of the strength of our core. When we lose that center, when we are constantly pulled outward, we become fragmented. Even the most meaningful connections begin to feel exhausting because we're giving from an empty cup. But when we claim time alone as sacred, not selfish, we give ourselves the chance to refill, to realign, to return to relationship with presence rather than pressure. Ironically, the people who fear solitude the most are often the ones who would benefit most profoundly from it, because the discomfort they anticipate is actually the doorway to something they've been craving: depth, truth, authenticity. But that doorway only opens when we stop avoiding ourselves. Solitude isn't just being alone, it's being with yourself. It's not passive, it's a meeting, a conversation, an exploration. And like any worthwhile relationship, it takes time to develop trust. The first few encounters might feel awkward. You might reach for your phone. You might distract yourself with tasks. But if you stay through the restlessness, something remarkable begins to happen. You soften, you remember, you return. Making peace with the inner dialogue. One of the reasons solitude is so powerful and so confronting is that it makes us acutely aware of our inner dialogue. That constant narration, often unconscious, rises to the surface when the external world goes quiet. At first, this can be overwhelming. We notice the critical voice, the looping thoughts, the unprocessed emotions. But this noticing is a gift, because once we become aware of our inner dialogue, we can begin to shift it. We can question it. We can choose a new voice. But that process only begins when we stop drowning it out. In solitude, we have the rare chance to listen without interference. The noise of the world dims, and what's left is our own voice. For some, this voice is harsh, trained by years of perfectionism or judgment. For others, it's uncertain, unsure, still forming. Regardless of what it sounds like, the goal isn't to silence it, but to understand it. Where did this voice come from? Whose values does it reflect? Does it speak with compassion or criticism? By getting curious, we create space for transformation. We realize that we are not our thoughts. We are the awareness behind them. And from that place of awareness, new possibilities emerge. With time, solitude becomes less about facing the harshness of our mind and more about befriending it. We learn to sit with ourselves the way we would sit with a beloved friend, gently, patiently, without needing to fix or change anything. This self-intimacy becomes the soil in which self-trust grows. And from self-trust comes freedom. We stop looking outward for permission. We stop outsourcing our worth. We begin to live in alignment with what feels true, even when it's inconvenient or misunderstood. Because we have touched something deeper than approval. We have met ourselves, and we are no longer afraid. Cultivating solitude in a distracted world. In a society that glorifies hustle and connectivity, carving out time for solitude can feel rebellious. But it is a rebellion worth making. It doesn't require moving to a cabin in the woods or renouncing the world. It requires intention. Small, consistent choices. A morning walk without your phone. An evening journal session instead of scrolling. A weekend retreat into silence, even if it's just in your bedroom. These acts may seem simple, but they are radical in their effect. They send a message to your nervous system. It is safe to slow down. It is safe to be with yourself. And over time, they become practices, not just activities, but rituals of reconnection. The key is not quantity, but quality. You don't need endless hours of solitude. You need presence in the moments you choose. It's better to spend 15 minutes fully attuned to your inner world than an hour distracted and restless. Solitude isn't about isolation from the world. It's about integration. It allows us to gather the fragmented parts of ourselves and bring them home. It makes our actions more intentional, our relationships more authentic, our words more aligned. Because when we know ourselves, we stop performing. We stop chasing. We start living from the inside out. There will always be reasons to avoid solitude, responsibilities, relationships, the persistent lure of entertainment. But those things don't disappear. They become more manageable, more meaningful when we approach them from a place of groundedness. And groundedness is born in silence, in stillness, in the courage to sit alone, not because we have no one, but because we have chosen ourselves. That choice is powerful. It is not selfish. It is foundational. You cannot pour into others if your own well is dry. Solitude fills that well. It restores. It clarifies. It heals. Chapter 14. Living with Clarity. There is a moment, often quiet and unremarkable, when something shifts inside us. Not with fanfare or some grand external event, but like a subtle rearrangement of gravity. A sense that the noise is no longer in charge, that you are no longer running on autopilot, reacting, chasing, bracing. Instead, you're inhabiting your life more fully, awake in your own skin, grounded not in perfection, but in presence. This, more than any insight or practice, is the true measure of clarity. Not the elimination of chaos or the absence of distraction, but the growing ability to meet it all with awareness, to respond rather than react, to walk through your days tethered to something deeper than momentum. Living with clarity is not a state you achieve and then hold forever. It is a continual return, a rhythm, a relationship with the truth of who you are beneath the noise. When we talk about clarity, we are not talking about certainty. Life does not deal in guarantees. The path will always shift. The terrain will always surprise us. But clarity is what allows us to move through that uncertainty without losing ourselves. It is the internal compass that keeps pointing us home, not because we always know what's coming, but because we've learned how to listen. Clarity is cultivated, not granted. It is the natural byproduct of presence, truth-telling, and solitude, the fruits of everything we've explored in this journey. It's what remains when we stop outsourcing our knowing and start trusting our own eyes, ears, and instincts. It's not loud, but it's unmistakable. And once you've touched it, even briefly, the dissonance of living any other way becomes harder to ignore. Clarity, at its core, is about alignment. It's about living in a way that reflects your inner truth rather than performing someone else's. This does not mean you will always feel confident or composed. Clarity does not mean you are never confused or afraid. What it means is that you have developed a foundation that can hold those experiences without collapsing. You are not ruled by them. You are in relationship with them. And this shift, from identifying with every passing feeling to being grounded in something deeper, is where your real power lives. It is the difference between drifting and steering, between reacting and choosing. And it starts always with a pause, with the space to notice, to name, to choose. The practice of returning living with clarity is not a finish line. It's a practice of returning again and again to what matters. And in a world designed to pull you away from yourself, that return is a radical act. It might happen in a morning ritual where you light a candle and journal before the day pulls at your sleeves. It might happen in a single breath before responding to a difficult email. It might happen after a week of falling back into old patterns when something inside whispers, "Come back." And you do, not with judgment or shame, but with compassion. This, perhaps, is the most overlooked part of clarity. It is deeply forgiving. It does not demand that you always get it right. It simply invites you to come home. Because clarity is not about control. It's about connection. When we misunderstand this, we start to weaponize clarity, turning it into a rigid set of rules or standards we must meet. We chase clarity the way we chase productivity, using it to measure our worth. But clarity is not a checklist. It is a relationship. And like any relationship, it requires presence, patience, and care. It deepens over time. It evolves. Some days it will feel crystalline and unmistakable. Other days, it may feel distant or muddy. This is natural. The point is not to hold on tight, but to stay in conversation. To keep asking, what's true for me now? And to listen for the answer, even if it's different from yesterday's. And when that answer comes, even as a whisper, follow it. Even if it's inconvenient, even if it means saying no, even if it means disappointing others. Because clarity often costs comfort. It calls you out of the familiar and into the honest. And while that honesty can feel disruptive, it is also where real peace begins. Not the fragile peace of people-pleasing, but the solid peace of integrity. The peace that comes when your outer life begins to reflect your inner knowing. And that peace, while not always easy to attain, is worth everything. Living with intention in the everyday. It is easy to think of clarity as something reserved for big decisions, career changes, relationships, life direction. But the truth is, clarity is built in the small daily choices we make. It's how we speak to ourselves when no one is listening. It's whether we scroll for an hour or sit with our discomfort. It's the way we pause before agreeing to something just because we're afraid to disappoint. These moments, seemingly insignificant, are where alignment is practiced. Because your life is not just the sum of your big decisions. It is the accumulation of small ones. And those small choices are shaped by your ability to stay present, to stay honest, to stay with yourself. Clarity in the everyday looks like waking up and checking in with yourself before you check your phone. It looks like creating small pockets of stillness in a day full of motion. It looks like setting boundaries, not as a defense, but as a form of devotion to your energy, your attention, your truth. It's choosing nourishment over numbing, reflection over reaction. These aren't dramatic changes, but they are profound because they rewire the way you relate to the world. They anchor you. They remind you that you are not at the mercy of your environment. You are a participant. You get to choose. And yes, there will be days when you forget. Days when the noise gets loud again, when you abandon yourself for convenience or comfort. This is not failure. This is being human. What matters is not perfection, but return. The moment you notice, you've already begun. And with each return, your capacity to live in clarity expands. It becomes less about effort and more about rhythm, less about strategy and more about trust. You begin to feel when something is off, not as a judgment, but as information. Your body becomes a compass. Your emotions become guides. And slowly, the life you're living starts to feel like your own. Integration and embodiment. Perhaps the most important part of this journey is integration. It's one thing to understand presence, truth, stillness, and solitude as concepts. It's another to embody them, to let them shape how you show up in the world. Embodiment means you don't just know what matters, you live it. Not always perfectly, but consistently. You carry your clarity into conversations, into your work, into the way you parent or partner or create. It becomes visible, not because you preach it, but because you radiate it. People can feel when someone is living from the inside out. There's a groundedness, a sincerity, a quiet confidence. You don't need to prove anything. You are rooted. This embodiment is not performative. It's not about appearing calm or enlightened. It's about alignment. When your actions match your values, when your choices reflect your truth, when your presence mirrors your intention, that is clarity embodied. It's when the distance between who you are and how you live begins to shrink. And that shrinking, that narrowing of the gap, is where peace lives. You stop second-guessing. You stop performing. You stop living for someone else's approval. and you start living for something deeper, something true. This, ultimately, is the gift of clarity. Not a life without noise, but a life where the noise no longer owns you. A life where you know how to return, where you trust your own rhythm, where you live awake. There is no final destination, no moment when you arrive and stay there forever. But there is a way of walking, steady, honest, alive. And that way is yours now. Not because someone gave it to you, but because you remembered. You remembered how to listen, how to pause, how to be. You remembered that beneath the noise, there is clarity, and it has been waiting for you all along. Chapter 15, Returning Home to Yourself. There comes a time, if we've been honest with ourselves, when we begin to see that what we were seeking out there was never out there at all. We realize that the endless searching for the perfect routine, the ultimate productivity hack, the praise of others, or even the silence of an untouched landscape, was only ever pointing us back to the deeper, quieter space within. It is here, not in the noise but beneath it, that we discover something we can finally trust. Not a dramatic revelation, not a sudden thunderclap of wisdom, but a simple, steady return to ourselves. This is the heart of clarity, not a high to chase, not an answer to memorize, but a way of being in the world that is honest, compassionate, awake. This return is not something you accomplish once and for all. It is a daily, moment-by-moment practice. It's the way you gently guide yourself back when you've drifted, not with judgment, but with kindness. It's the pause before reacting, the breath before speaking, the silence before deciding. It is, in many ways, a kind of remembering. Remembering what it feels like to inhabit your body instead of just dragging it from task to task. Remembering what it's like to trust your gut before looking outside for answers. Remembering that you are not your thoughts, your titles, your to-do lists, or your followers. You are the awareness beneath all that. And when you remember, even for a second, something shifts. Not the world. You. You begin to notice the difference between movement and momentum. You begin to sense the weight of things you once carried without question. You start to hear the way your mind races to fix, solve, perform. Then you breathe and let it go. Not every time, but more often than before. And that's what growth really is. Not perfection, but frequency. Not becoming someone new, but returning more often to who you already are. That is what clarity gives us. The capacity to return. To see clearly, not because life has gotten easier or quieter, but because we are no longer held hostage by its volume. We've learned how to listen beyond the noise. Wholeness over improvement. So much of what drives the noise in our world is this underlying belief that we are not yet enough. That if we just optimize more, hustle harder, improve faster, we'll finally feel at peace. But peace doesn't arrive as a reward for self-improvement. It's what happens when we begin to treat ourselves not as projects to be fixed, but as people to be loved. Living with clarity is not about becoming better. It's about becoming whole. And wholeness isn't found in adding more. It's found in releasing what isn't true. The expectations, the personas, the compulsive striving. Clarity invites you to drop the act and meet yourself as you are. Imperfect, human, beautiful in your enoughness. This doesn't mean you stop growing or learning. On the contrary, when you live from a place of worthiness, your growth becomes joyful instead of desperate. You try new things not because you have something to prove, but because you're curious, alive, open. You begin to heal not from shame, but from love. You make choices that align with your truth, not to impress anyone, but because you've realized that no performance can ever replace peace, and peace only lives where truth is welcomed. Wholeness is not a distant place. It's here in this moment when you let yourself just be. That stillness, that's the doorway home. You'll notice it in the quiet shifts, the way you pause to savor your morning coffee, instead of gulping it down on the run. The way you allow yourself a moment of rest without guilt. The way you hold space for your own sadness without trying to fix it. These moments are small, but they are sacred. They are the stitching of a life lived in alignment, and over time, they build a rhythm of presence so rich, it becomes unmistakable. You become the kind of person who moves slowly even in fast places. The kind of person who radiates peace not because life is easy, but because you've stopped abandoning yourself. Sustaining inner clarity in a noisy world. Perhaps the greatest challenge is not finding clarity, but keeping it in a world that constantly pulls us away. The noise will always be there. Deadlines will come. Notifications will ping. Expectations will hover. But you are not powerless. You have tools now: presence, stillness, truth, solitude. And these are not luxuries. They are lifelines. They are how you remain rooted when the world spins fast, how you remember who you are when you're tempted to perform, how you breathe when everything says panic. These practices are not about escaping life, but about meeting it more fully, more courageously, more humanely. You don't need to disappear to a cabin in the woods to live with clarity. You can live it in traffic, at the dinner table, in the boardroom. It's not about location. It's about intention. It's the way you choose to be in the moment you're in. Are you reactive or responsive? Are you distracted or present? Are you performing or connecting? Clarity shows up in how you do the dishes, how you say yes or no, how you talk to the barista, how you talk to yourself. It is not reserved for retreats and revelations. It's available in the middle of a Tuesday, in the mess of your inbox, in the quiet of a sigh. You just have to remember to look for it, and when you forget, and you will, let that be your invitation back. Don't shame yourself for drifting. That's what minds do. Just notice. Breathe. Begin again. One clear breath can return you. One honest sentence can ground you. One true moment can realign you. This is the quiet miracle of clarity. It doesn't require you to be anyone else. It only asks that you be here as you are. From that place, life unfolds differently. Not without pain, but with less resistance. Not without effort, but with more grace. You stop clinging and start trusting. You stop bracing and start opening. And life, in all its mess and mystery, becomes not a problem to solve, but a journey to walk. Living the question. As we close this chapter, I want to offer something simple. Not an answer, but a question. What kind of life feels true to you? Not the life that looks good on paper. Not the life that earns applause, but the life that feels right in your body, that brings you alive from the inside out. Let that question live in you. Don't rush to answer it. Let it shape your choices. Let it rearrange your priorities. Let it disrupt what needs to be disrupted and soften what has gone hard. This is the question that clarity asks, not once, but again and again. And every time you ask it, you get a little closer to home. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are simply in the process of remembering. Remembering that clarity is not out there waiting to be found. It is yet beneath the noise, in the still, steady rhythm of your own presence. You know the way, even if you've forgotten. The path is yours to walk, and there is no right speed. Go gently. Go honestly. Go as you are. And when it gets loud again, and it will, come back here. Not to this book necessarily, but to yourself, to your breath, to the moment, to the truth that you are already enough, already whole, already clear beneath it all. This is not the end, it's the beginning of living not just beneath the noise, but beyond it. Welcome home.